The morning my daughter-in-law took my SUV without asking, my son told me to stop acting like everything I owned belonged only to me. That sentence stayed with me longer than the empty driveway. I was 63 years old, 6 weeks past a cardiology scare, and standing outside my house in Hendersonville, North Carolina, holding an appointment folder I had waited nearly 2 months to use. My keys were in my hand. My coffee was getting cold. My vehicle was gone. 10 minutes later, my daughter-in-law sent me a selfie from behind the steering wheel with the message, "Borrowing the Tahoe. You're retired, so I knew you wouldn't need it this early." She had used the spare key I kept inside my kitchen for emergencies. When I told her to turn around, she said her parents had just landed in Charlotte and asked whether I could be flexible for once. My son texted, "Dad, please don't make this a whole thing. Family shares." By that afternoon, I had learned something I should have understood years earlier. In my son's marriage, family shares meant I owned things until Ashley wanted them. By Thanksgiving, she would invite her parents into my mountain cabin without asking, move my late wife's belongings out of the master bedroom, and tell everyone the place would soon be the family house once I finally downsized. She made one mistake. She thought because I loved my grandchildren, I would keep swallowing disrespect forever. My name is Calvin Reed. I spent 34 years as a commercial electrician and later ran maintenance operations for a chain of grocery distribution centers across western North Carolina. It was not glamorous work, but it was steady, skilled, and paid well enough that my wife, Margaret, and I built a comfortable life without pretending we were wealthier than we were. We raised one son, Derek, in a brick ranch outside Hendersonville, saved for retirement, bought a small cabin near Lake Lure after 27 years of marriage, and eventually reached the stage where the mortgage was paid, the bills were manageable, and Friday dinner meant deciding whether we wanted to cook or drive into Asheville. Margaret died 5 years before this story began. Ovarian cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to funeral. There are losses that divide your life into before and after so completely that the person you were before feels like someone you used to know. Margaret had been the social one. She remembered birthdays, mailed cards, bought Christmas gifts in October, and knew which relative was secretly fighting with which other relative before I even knew there was a fight. I fixed things. She understood people. After she died, I discovered how much of our family balance had depended on her translating everyone to everyone else. Derek loved his mother deeply. He was 36 when she died and already married to Ashley with 2 children, Mason and Lily. Losing Margaret hit him hard. For a while, it brought us closer. He called every day. Ashley brought casseroles. The grandchildren slept at my house on weekends because the silence felt less dangerous when cartoons were playing. I was grateful for them. Maybe that gratitude is why I ignored the first few boundary crossings. Ashley would say, "Cal, can I borrow your truck for one quick Home Depot run?" and return it the next afternoon. Derek would ask me to watch the kids for 2 hours and pick them up 7 hours later because dinner ran long. Ashley began using the cabin for girls' weekends because, as she put it, it's silly for a beautiful place to sit empty. The first time she asked. The second time she told me. By the fourth time, I learned about it from a photograph she posted online of 6 women drinking wine on my porch beneath the caption, "Our little mountain escape." I commented, "Looks familiar." She replied with 3 laughing emojis. I told myself not to become the difficult widowed father-in-law who made everyone ask permission for every small thing. Margaret had always been generous. She would have wanted the house full. That is what I told myself. But generosity and access are not the same thing. I understood that too late. Derek had always been easygoing. As a boy, he hated conflict so much that if 2 friends argued, he would disappear into another room until they worked it out. Ashley was the opposite. She was decisive, social, organized, and very good at turning her preference into a plan everyone else somehow remembered agreeing to. She worked as an office manager for an orthodontic group in Asheville and ran her household like a project board. She scheduled holidays 6 months early, chose where everyone sat, decided which family photographs got posted, and spoke in the cheerful voice of someone who had already moved past the possibility of no. "We're doing brunch at 11. We're taking the kids to your cabin Friday. I put your name down for pickup. I told my parents you'd drive them." The first few years, I admired her efficiency. Then I noticed efficiency always seemed to save her time using mine. Margaret noticed it too. Once, after Ashley volunteered me to build a backyard playhouse for Mason, Margaret said, "Did she ask you or inform you?" I laughed. Margaret did not. There's a difference, Cal. That was 3 years before she got sick. I wish I had remembered it sooner. After Margaret died, the family began treating my schedule as if retirement had turned every hour into surplus inventory. Derek asked me to pick up Mason from school twice a week because aftercare was expensive. I said yes. Then Tuesday and Thursday became Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whenever Ashley had meetings. I loved my grandson, so I adapted. Lily started preschool, and suddenly I was the emergency contact because I lived closest. Fine. Then I became the regular contact because Ashley's office did not like personal calls. Fine. Their dog stayed with me during vacations. Fine. I helped Derek replace a water heater, repaired deck boards, drove them to the airport, stored Christmas decorations in my garage, and kept a duplicate house key, just in case. I did not mind individual favors. What wore me down was the assumption beneath them. Nobody asked whether I had plans because the family had quietly decided my plans were less real. I played golf Wednesday mornings with 3 retired coworkers. Ashley once called during the 6th hole because Lily had forgotten a lunchbox. When I said I could not leave immediately, she replied, "Cal, it's golf." I drove the lunchbox to school anyway. Another time, I had tickets to a bluegrass concert with my neighbor Martin. Derek called 30 minutes before we left and asked me to stay with the kids because Ashley had booked a last-minute dinner for her parents' anniversary. I said I had plans. He went silent in that disappointed way that made me feel selfish. "Dad, we never ask you for anything." I almost laughed. Instead, I canceled the concert. That sentence, "we never ask you for anything," is what entitlement sounds like after enough favors have become invisible. The SUV Ashley took that Friday was a dark green Chevrolet Tahoe Margaret and I had bought 2 months before her diagnosis. Margaret loved that vehicle because she said the color looked like mountain pine after rain. During treatment, it carried blankets, medication bags, hospital pillows, and more fast food coffee cups than I care to remember. After she died, I almost sold it because every part of the interior held a memory. Then I decided keeping it hurt less than replacing it. By the time Ashley took it, the Tahoe had become ordinary again, which is sometimes the closest grief gets to healing. I had given Derek a spare key because he occasionally moved it when I was out of town. I had never given one to Ashley. She had apparently taken Derek's copy from his key drawer, driven to my house at 7 that morning, opened my side door with the spare house key, taken the vehicle key from the kitchen bowl, and left her own sedan at home because one tire had developed a slow leak. She did not call before doing any of this. I walked outside at 7:45 for a cardiology follow-up. I had waited 7 weeks to get and found an empty driveway. I had been having episodes of dizziness and chest pressure. Nothing dramatic, but after losing Margaret, I no longer believed in assuming symptoms would politely wait. My phone buzzed while I was checking the garage. Ashley's selfie came first. Sunglasses, coffee cup, my steering wheel. "Borrowing the Tahoe. Don't worry, I'll bring it back after I get Mom and Dad settled." I called immediately. Road noise filled the background. "Ashley, where are you?" "On I-26. Why?" "Turn around." She laughed because she thought I was joking. "Cal, I'm already almost to Asheville. I have a cardiology appointment. Can Derek take you?" "Derek is at work." "Uber?" She said it like she had just solved a puzzle. "Ashley, you entered my house and took my vehicle without asking." Her voice changed. "I didn't enter. I used the spare key." Derek said it was fine. I called Derek. He admitted he had told her where my key was, but claimed he assumed she would text first. "Then tell her to bring it back." He sighed. "Dad, her parents are flying in. Her car tire is bad. Can we not turn this into something bigger?" "I have a doctor's appointment." "Take a lift. I'll pay for it." "That is not the point." "What is the point?" That question told me more than I wanted to know. I called Martin. He was in my driveway 8 minutes later wearing gym shorts and carrying a travel mug. "Hospital?" he asked. "Cardiologist. Get in." He did not ask whether the appointment mattered enough. He assumed if I said I needed a ride, I needed a ride. The cardiologist increased one medication and scheduled monitoring. Nothing catastrophic. By 11:30 I was home. The Tahoe was not. Ashley texted that her parents wanted lunch in Asheville and she would return it by 2. At 2, she said 4. At 5, Derek called and said they had decided to take her parents to dinner in Biltmore Village, but the Tahoe would definitely be back that night. I told him I needed it returned. "Dad, you're home. That does not make it theirs." Nobody said it was theirs. Then why am I negotiating for the return of my own car? He became quiet. At 9:20, Ashley posted a photograph from a restaurant. Her parents, her sister, Derek, and the kids were smiling around a table. Through the window behind them, my Tahoe was visible under a streetlight. The caption read, "Family weekend starts now." I was not in the photograph. My vehicle was. I stared at that picture longer than I should have. Something about it clarified years of small interactions. I was useful even when absent. My house key, my car, my cabin, my time, my money for the grandkids' summer camp. Pieces of me could attend family events without the inconvenience of the person attached. Friday became Saturday. Ashley's parents wanted to see Chimney Rock. Derek asked if they could keep the Tahoe because it had more room. I said no. He said they were already on the road. Then bring it back afterward. Saturday night, no Tahoe. Sunday morning, Ashley texted, "Last day, promise. Mom wants outlet shopping." I did not argue. I wrote one message. Vehicle back in my driveway by 6:00 p.m. House key and Tahoe spare on kitchen counter. We will discuss future access later. At 5:47, I heard tires. Ashley parked the Tahoe, came inside without knocking, dropped the keys beside my coffee maker and said, "You could have been nicer about all this." I looked at her. There were fast food bags in the back seat, half a tank of gas missing, a sticky juice ring in one cup holder, and a fresh scratch near the passenger door. "You could have asked." "I knew you would say yes." "Then why didn't you?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Derek came in behind her. "Can we just move on?" That was his answer to most family problems. Move on usually meant I stopped mentioning something while everyone kept the benefits. "No," I said. Ashley folded her arms. Derek looked tired. I put both keys on the counter between us. "From now on, nobody enters my house when I'm not here, unless I specifically ask. Nobody takes a vehicle. Nobody uses the cabin without asking me directly. No more telling the kids I'm available before checking with me. Ask first. Wait for an answer." Ashley stared at me as if I had announced a dress code. "We're family." "Correct. So now we need appointments to see you?" "That is not what I said." Derek rubbed his forehead. "Dad, this feels like punishment." "A boundary is not punishment because the old arrangement was convenient for you." Ashley laughed sharply. "Where did you get that? Therapy TikTok?" I almost smiled. "Your mother-in-law. That shut her up." Margaret had said versions of it for years. I took back the spare house key. Derek looked hurt. I hated that. He was still my son. But love cannot require pretending a locked door is an insult when people keep walking through it uninvited. For several weeks, things improved. Not because anyone agreed with me, but because access had become harder. Ashley texted before asking me to pick up the kids. Derek asked before borrowing tools. I said yes to some things and no to others. The first time I declined a Friday babysitting request because Martin and I were driving to Knoxville for a concert, Ashley replied, "Wow, okay." 2 words with enough judgment to fill a room. I went anyway. Nothing terrible happened. They hired a sitter. That realization was almost embarrassing. For years, I'd behaved as if every inconvenience in my son's house would become an emergency unless I prevented it. Turns out adults solve problems when the free solution stops answering. Then Thanksgiving came. The Lake Lure cabin had always been Margaret's favorite place. We bought it when Derek was in college, a cedar-sided 3-bedroom place on a wooded slope above the water. It was not enormous or fancy. The kitchen had old oak cabinets, the porch leaned slightly downhill, and the fireplace smoked if the wind came from the east. Margaret loved it. She kept a yellow quilt in the master bedroom that her mother had sewn, a recipe box beside the stove, and framed photographs of Derek growing up along the stairway. After she died, I went there when the house in Hendersonville felt too quiet. Sometimes I spent weekends doing nothing except drinking coffee on the porch and listening to boats far below. I invited Derek's family often, but it had never become theirs. At least I thought everyone understood that. In early October, Ashley asked whether we could do Thanksgiving at the cabin. I hesitated. Holidays there were emotionally complicated, but the grandchildren loved it. "Just us?" I asked. "Us. Maybe my parents for dinner, if that's okay." I said her parents were welcome for Thanksgiving Day, but asked that overnight plans go through me because sleeping space was limited. She agreed. 2 weeks later, she created a group text called Mountain Thanksgiving, containing 14 people, including her parents, her sister and brother-in-law, their toddler, and one of Derek's cousins. Can't wait for everyone to be together at Cal's, she wrote. I replied privately, Ashley, I agreed to your parents for dinner, not a 14-person weekend. She responded, most aren't staying the whole time. We'll figure it out. I called Derek. He said Ashley had gotten excited and invited people before thinking through beds. Can we just make it work? No. Dad. No, Derek. The cabin sleeps 6 comfortably. I am not hosting 14 people for 4 days. He became frustrated. You barely use it. There it was again. Ownership measured by how often I occupied something. I do not need to prove use to keep control of my own property. We compromised, or so I thought. Ashley said only her parents would sleep there. Her sister would book a rental nearby. Everyone else would come Thanksgiving afternoon. I arrived at the cabin Wednesday morning with groceries and 2 pies from a bakery Margaret loved. 3 cars were already in the driveway. I stood there with my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the exact same cold disbelief I had felt staring at the empty space where the Tahoe should have been. Inside, music was playing. Ashley's mother, Brenda, was arranging flowers on the dining table. Her father, Doug, carried a suitcase down the hall. Ashley's sister had a portable crib set up in the small guest room. 2 children were watching television. Ashley walked out of the kitchen wearing one of Margaret's old aprons. Surprise! We got an early start. I did not move. Why are they staying here? She glanced toward her sister. Their rental canceled. Her sister immediately said, It didn't cancel. Ashley said this would be easier. Ashley shot her a look. I set my groceries down. Where is Derek? Getting firewood. I walked toward the master bedroom. My suitcase from a previous weekend, which I kept in the closet, had been moved to the hallway. Brenda's luggage was on my bed. Margaret's yellow quilt was gone. Where is the quilt? Ashley called from the kitchen. I folded it and put it in the linen closet. Mom has allergies and old fabric holds dust. I opened the linen closet. The quilt had been shoved on the bottom beneath beach towels. Something hot moved through my chest. Ashley? She appeared behind me. What? Take your mother's luggage out of my bedroom. Put Margaret's quilt back. Cal, Mom and Dad need the bigger bed. Doug's back is terrible. Then they can book a hotel with a bigger bed. Her face hardened. Seriously? Seriously. Brenda appeared at the end of the hallway looking mortified. We can move. Ashley immediately said, No, Mom. Cal is just particular because Margaret decorated everything. Particular. Grief becomes a personality flaw when it interferes with someone else's convenience. I looked into the living room. The framed photograph of Margaret and me on our 25th anniversary was missing from the mantel. In its place sat a wooden sign Ashley had brought that read, Grateful Together. Where's the photograph? I put the personal stuff in the desk drawer so the group pictures look cleaner. I opened the drawer. 3 photographs of Margaret had been stacked face down. I do not remember deciding to sit, but suddenly I was in the armchair by the window. Ashley kept talking about table space and aesthetic clutter. I barely heard her. My wife had been removed from her own cabin, so Ashley's Thanksgiving photographs would look cleaner. Derek arrived 15 minutes later carrying firewood. I took him onto the porch. Your wife moved your mother's quilt and photographs. He closed his eyes. Dad, she's trying to make room. She put her parents in our bedroom. Doug's back. Do not explain this to me like I'm confused. He set down the firewood. What do you want me to do? Throw everyone out the day before Thanksgiving? I want you to recognize that this keeps happening because you would rather I absorb it than ask Ashley to stop. He looked away. That hurt because silence was agreement. Dad, she's under stress. I had a cardiology appointment when she took my Tahoe. I know. Your mother's pictures are in a drawer. I know. And your answer is? She's under stress. His jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? Something that proves I am not the only person in this family expected to be flexible. We stood looking at the lake through bare trees. Finally, he said, I'll fix the room. He did. Brenda and Doug moved into the downstairs guest room. Ashley's sister took her toddler to a hotel. Margaret's quilt returned to the bed. The photographs went back on the mantel. Ashley spoke to me only when necessary for the rest of Wednesday. I was fine with that. What I was not fine with was waking Thursday morning to a typed schedule taped to the refrigerator. Calvin turkey, gravy, breakfast cleanup, ice run, Derek firewood, drinks, Ashley table styling, appetizers, photos. I stared at it. Ashley came in carrying coffee. You're up early. Turkey needs to go in around 9. Why am I cooking the turkey? You always cook it. Margaret always had. I helped. I was planning to. Great. I was not planning to be assigned breakfast cleanup and errands. She sighed. Cal, everyone has a job. I looked at her list. Brenda, sweet potatoes. Doug, relax, bad back. Paige, salad. Kyle, watch kids. Ashley's role was table styling, appetizers, photos. You gave yourself photography. Someone has to document the holiday. Then document me not going for ice. I took the schedule down and threw it away. Her mouth fell open. Why are you trying to make everything difficult? Because apparently saying no feels difficult when you planned my yes without asking. Derek walked in halfway through and immediately said, "Can we please not do this today? Thanksgiving dinner should have been warm." The food was good. The grandchildren made paper turkeys and put one at each place. Brenda brought a sweet potato casserole Margaret would have hated because it had marshmallows, which made me smile despite myself. For an hour, everyone behaved. Then Ashley wanted photographs. She positioned her parents by the fireplace, Derek beside her, the grandchildren in front, her sister's family near the edge. I stayed seated. "Cal, come on," she said. "Family picture." I stood and moved toward them. She handed me her phone. "Actually, can you take the first one? Then we'll get one with you." I looked at the phone, then at the group. I knew this scene. I had lived variations of it for years. I was useful enough to preserve the memory, optional inside it. "Use the timer." I handed the phone back. Ashley rolled her eyes. Her sister offered to take it. We took one photograph with everyone. Ashley immediately asked for one with the core family. I started to step away because I assumed she meant Derek, her, and the kids. Then she pulled her parents beside them. I stood near the sofa. Lily looked at me and said, "Grandpa, aren't you core?" Nobody laughed. Children do that sometimes. They asked the question all the adults agreed not to hear. Ashley said, "Of course he is. We're just doing different combinations." We sat for dessert. That is when Doug raised his glass and thanked me for letting the next generation make memories here. I nodded politely. Then Brenda said, "We were telling Ashley how perfect this place will be once they renovate the downstairs." I looked at Derek. He looked confused. "Renovate?" Ashley became very still. Brenda continued innocently, "For when Cal moves closer to town, Ashley said you two would probably use this as the family lake house full-time." Silence. Derek turned toward his wife. "You said what?" Ashley laughed too brightly. "We talked about it as a someday thing." "We did not," I said. "Cal, obviously not tomorrow. Not someday either, unless I decide it." She looked embarrassed because her parents were watching. "You're 63. You've said the stairs bother your knees." I said my knees hurt after replacing porch boards. "Okay, but eventually this is going to Derek." "Maybe, maybe not." That stunned the table. Not because I had threatened to disinherit anyone, because everyone had silently treated my death like a transfer date already entered on a calendar. Mason, who was 10, looked at me. "Mom said when you move to the apartment, I can have the loft room." Derek closed his eyes. Ashley whispered, "Mason." I put my fork down. "What apartment?" He shrugged. "The one near us so we can check on you." The room became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator. I looked at Ashley. "You have been telling the children I am moving out of my home?" "Not your main home. Eventually, we were discussing because we have to plan for the future." "With everyone except me," Derek said. "Ashley, why would you tell them that?" "Because we have to plan for the future. Nobody wants Cal alone out here when he's 80. I'm 63. You know what I mean." That sentence again. A phrase people use when they want you to cooperate with an insult without making them say it plainly. I looked around the table at my son, my grandchildren, Ashley's parents, her sister. I suddenly felt exhausted, not physically, though my cardiologist would have had opinions about my blood pressure, but exhausted from explaining why my life still belonged to me. "Dinner is over for me," I said. Ashley stared. "Seriously?" "Yes." I stood. "Everyone who is staying tonight can stay tonight. Tomorrow morning, this weekend ends." "Brenda and Doug, this is not your fault," Paige, Kyle. "I know you were told something different, but there will be no extended gathering here. Derek, you and I will talk later." Ashley pushed back her chair. "You're throwing my parents out on Thanksgiving?" "I am telling adults who were invited under false assumptions that tomorrow they need other plans." "Because I said the cabin might be ours someday?" Because you took my vehicle without asking, entered my house, treated my schedule as empty, used this cabin like a group rental, moved my wife's belongings, assigned me work in my own home. And now I discover you have been promising my property to your family and my grandchildren while I'm alive and well enough to hear it. She started crying. Derek said, "Dad, maybe we should cool down." I have been cooling down for years. That silenced him. Ashley's mother looked ashamed. "Calvin, I'm sorry. She told us you wanted to downsize." "I believe you." Ashley turned toward her. "Mom, don't," Brenda said. "No, Ashley." "You made it sound decided." Doug nodded. "You did." For the first time, her own family refused to help rewrite the moment. Ashley looked at Derek. "Are you going to let everyone pile on me?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "You told the kids Dad was moving. Because someday he will. That's not your decision." I had waited years to hear my son say something that simple. Ashley stood and left the table. A bedroom door slammed upstairs. Mason began crying because he thought he had caused the argument. I sat beside him and told him none of it was his fault. "Is the cabin still yours?" he asked. "Yes." "Can we still come? When I invite you?" "Absolutely." "Is that bad?" "No. That's how houses work." He considered this carefully, then nodded. The next morning, everyone packed. I helped Doug carry a suitcase despite his back, because I was still myself. Boundaries did not require becoming cruel. Brenda hugged me and apologized again. Paige and Kyle left without drama. Ashley barely spoke. Derek stayed behind after the kids got into the car. "Dad, I'm sorry." I waited. He looked toward the cabin. I knew she pushed. I let it happen because saying yes to her was easier than arguing, and I knew you would probably give in. "That is not an apology yet." He nodded, swallowed, and tried again. "I used your patience because it made my marriage easier." That was the truth, painful, but clean. "Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you." He asked what happened now. I told him I loved him, loved the kids, and was no longer available as automatic backup. Visits would be planned. Cabin use required asking me. No keys. No promises about my property, schedule, or money. If he and Ashley needed childcare, they could ask. I might say yes. I might say no. He said Ashley would feel punished. Then she will need to learn the difference between losing access and being harmed. Derek laughed weakly. "You've been reading. I've been thinking. That winter was uncomfortable." Ashley posted a family Christmas photograph with a caption about protecting your peace when people choose control over connection. I did not respond. A few relatives called, asking whether I had kicked my son's family out on Thanksgiving. I told each person the short version once. They were welcome for dinner. I ended an unauthorized weekend after learning my daughter-in-law had been promising my property to others. Some understood, some did not. I stopped campaigning for agreement. Derek visited alone in January. We ate barbecue in Asheville and talked more honestly than we had in years. He admitted Ashley had started counseling after several fights about boundaries. He admitted he had his own work to do because he used avoidance as a form of permission. "I thought keeping her happy meant keeping the family happy," he said. "It mostly meant sending the problem toward you." I appreciated that. I did not tell him what to do with his marriage. That was another boundary I needed. The grandchildren came for a weekend in February. Ashley asked by text, not through Derek, whether the dates worked. She wrote, "Would it be okay if Mason and Lily stay with you Friday through Sunday? Totally fine if not." I read the message twice because the phrase, "totally fine if not," was new. I said yes. When she dropped them off, she remained on the porch, rather than walking in automatically. "Can I come in?" she asked. Yes. Progress does not always arrive as a dramatic apology. Sometimes it is someone waiting outside a door they once treated as theirs. We drank coffee. Ashley apologized for taking the Tahoe. Then for Thanksgiving, she cried when she admitted she had viewed my retirement as unused capacity. "You were always available," she said. "So I started thinking that meant you should be." I told her availability was a gift, not an identity. She nodded. "I know. I did not promise immediate trust. She did not ask me to. The Tahoe stayed mine until I sold it the following spring. Selling it was harder than I expected. I cried in the dealership parking lot after removing Margaret's old sunglasses from the center console. Then I bought a smaller pickup because it suited my life better. Nobody had a spare key. At the cabin, I repaired the porch and rehung every photograph Ashley had put in the desk drawer. I framed one more. Margaret standing by the lake in an oversized sun hat, laughing because the wind had nearly taken it. I placed it above the mantel, not as a warning, as a fact. She had existed. We had built that place. My life did not become public inventory because she died. I also began using the cabin more, not to prove ownership, because I had spent years saving my best things for family who assumed they would always be there. Martin and I went fishing. I hosted my old work crew one weekend. I took a woodworking class in Boone and stayed at the cabin afterward just because I could. I met a widow named Claire through a volunteer home repair group. We became friends. Maybe someday something more, maybe not. The point is I stopped treating the remainder of my life like a waiting room for other people's needs. The next Thanksgiving, Derek asked what I wanted to do. That wording mattered. I chose dinner at my house in Hendersonville instead of the cabin. 12 people came. Ashley asked before inviting her parents. I said yes. She brought sweet potatoes and did not create a task chart. When we took photographs, she set the phone on a timer and stood beside me. No one handed me the camera. During dinner, Mason asked whether he could have the loft room next time we visited the cabin. I said, "If I invite you, first pick." He grinned. Ashley did not flinch. Later, while washing dishes, she said quietly, "I'm sorry I made your future sound like something I had already scheduled." Thank you. I think I was scared of uncertainty. Most people are. That doesn't make it mine to control. No, she dried a plate and put it away in the wrong cabinet. Margaret would have corrected her. I let it go. Not every imperfection is a boundary violation. Learning the difference gave me peace. I still help my family. That surprises people who hear the story and expect the ending to be permanent exile. I pick up Lily from school sometimes. I help Derek replace his garage door opener. I let Ashley use the cabin for her 40th birthday weekend after she asked 2 months in advance and gave me the dates. The difference is choice. A favor chosen feels like love. A favor assumed feels like extraction. My son needed to learn that. Ashley needed to learn it. Most of all, I needed to learn it. I had spent decades believing a good father never made his children feel inconvenient. After Margaret died, that belief turned me into a man who kept erasing his own inconvenience so everyone else could remain comfortable. The empty driveway changed that. Missing my own vehicle was not really about transportation. It was the first physical image I could not explain away. Something of mine was gone because someone else had decided their plan mattered more than my permission. Thanksgiving was the same lesson in a larger room. My cabin, my wife's quilt, my photographs, my holiday, my future all rearranged by people who believed love meant they could write on my calendar in permanent ink. They were wrong. Family does not mean everything belongs to everyone. Family means you care enough to ask. You listen when the answer is no. You do not measure an older person's life by how much of it you expect to inherit. You do not turn retirement into permanent availability or generosity into an unlimited subscription. And if someone sets a boundary after years of giving, you do not get to call them selfish simply because the old version of them was easier to use. I am 65 now. My cardiologist says my numbers are better. The cabin is still mine. The yellow quilt is still on the bed. Margaret's photographs are still on the mantle. Derek and I are closer because we finally stopped pretending silence was closeness. Ashley and I are respectful, sometimes warm, and still careful. Trust does not grow because everyone agrees to forget. It grows when people repeatedly behave differently. My grandchildren know they can ask Grandpa for things without assuming the answer. That may be the most important inheritance I ever give them. Not a cabin. Not money. The knowledge that love can survive the word no. So tell me honestly, if your own son and daughter-in-law kept treating your car, your time, your home, and even your future as family property because you had always been generous, would you keep giving to avoid conflict? Or would you finally take back the keys and make them learn that loving you is not the same thing as having unlimited access to your life?